been huge exploration on Thackaringa. It's, it's like a bloody violet crumble out there. Everywhere you look, there's some form of remnants of exploration.
Meet Hugh Lord, a fifth-generation farmer at Thackaringa Station, a property 40 kilometres southwest of Broken Hill. He is also a commercial pilot and runs H&A Air with his GP wife, Dr Aliza Lord. He is honest, hardworking, humorous and grounded. He is today's guest on A Home in the Outback, an independent podcast about people living, working and creating in the far west of New South Wales. I'm your host, Catherine Waite. Hugh and his father David Lord are the farmers on the station, although Hugh will say farming is not as unique as you imagine. They run both sheep and cattle, but Hugh says he'll only shear sheep if his life depended on it and if someone died. Hugh says his family has been on the property since 1876, well before Broken Hill was established. Hugh started to learn to fly after he worked for a company who used planes to muster. He started on light aircraft but says he caught the bug of flying and pursued it till he could fly Cessna 172s and fly commercially. He also has a helicopter licence. Hugh shares his perspectives on climate change, the relationship between mining and farming, the future of farming, mental health of farmers and succession planning. Well, Hugh, thank you for your time today and for having a chat. It's taken a little bit of back and forth to finally have our meeting, but I'm so grateful for your time.
No, you're welcome. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Yeah, where did you grow up?
I grew up on Thackaringa Station, just west of Broken Hill. Did school there and then eventually went to boarding school. Did 6 years of boarding school and then came home and started work.
Would you think most people have heard of Thackaringa Station in town?
A lot of people have, but there are a few people that, it's a certain proportion of people who haven't.
Yeah. So is it quite big?
It's a bit over 60,000 hectares, which is not big in the scheme of things. There's a lot of places much bigger.
And has it always been kind of in your family?
So part of it has always been in our family. It's other parts we've brought in, but we've been there since 1876. So since before Broken Hill was here.
Do you know how that came to be?
My great grandfather was carting ore in Burra and somehow ended up here and opened a butcher's shop with a station. I'm not 100% sure how he ended up this way, but he did, yeah.
What is the station? Is it a sheep farm or?
Sheep and cattle.
And how many sheep and cattle do you have?
It varies. There's never really a specific number because it goes from, drought to good season. So we're in a rebuilding flock at the moment, or rebuilding stage at the moment. So we're probably about half stocked, or a bit over half stocked now as we're trying to rebuild. So this rain we've just had will make it a lot better.
Yeah. What was it like growing up at the station?
It was good. Used to do whatever we wanted and play with motorbikes or Tonka trucks or whatever age you were, and then went to boarding school, and it was good to come home. We came home every 3 weeks or something. But it was good. We worked a lot. We started work as soon as school holidays were on. We were working, so but that was fun for us. Yeah.
What did your dad get you to do, or your parents?
Everything. Mustering, fixing pipes, fencing, windmills, fences. We did everything that Dad could do. If we could pick it up, we could do it, basically. So, obviously any of the heavy stuff he did, but yeah.
What did you like doing?
Probably mustering, mostly.
Yeah. On a motorbike?
Yeah.
So, did you start to learn to ride when you were quite young?
I actually don't know how old I was. Probably 4 or 5, I assume. I really don't know how old I was. I remember my first ride, but I got no idea how old I was.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't know, do you have any favourite spots on the property or like places you'd like to go?
Probably the favourite spot's where Eliza and I got married.
Yeah.
There's a rock called Frog Rock, and that's where we got married, so that's probably, pretty easily my favourite spot.
Yeah. Where did you go to boarding school?
In Adelaide.
And how did you find boarding school after doing School of the Air?
Oh, it was the most horrible thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. I hated 6 years of hating every single minute of it. The only thing that was worse than boarding school was the food at boarding school.
Why is that? Why didn't you like it?
Just hated being in the boarding house. You were very restricted. It was very regimental. I'd go home and work on holidays and be doing an adult's day, being treated like an adult, and you go to boarding school and they treat you like an idiot. And then, I didn't like school to start with, but then you added that on top. So
yeah, that's interesting. Were there others at school who had the same experience?
I think I probably hated it more than everyone.
Yeah.
But most people didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And were they also from properties too? So they felt that?
Yeah. Some were, some weren't. Some, sort of it was just a respect thing, if you're old enough and mature enough, but they still treated you like you were a 2-year-old.
Yeah. Mm. And you weren't able to convince your folks to...
No, that wasn't going to happen.
And have you always kind of wanted to be a farmer?
No, not necessarily. I thought I'd might have gone and played a bit of sport, or thought about being a physio for a bit, and then because I was sort of pretty heavily into my sport for a bit, and then was a boilermaker for a few years, and then went back farming, and then started flying. That was so I think it was always gonna happen, but I sort of sniffed around.
Yeah. What sports were you playing growing up?
Rugby.
Union?
Yeah.
Yeah. What position?
Predominantly number 8.
And that is for non-rugby union people?
They're the loose forwards, so at the back of the scrum, or sort of floating between the forwards and the backs.
And you played for school?
School, club and state.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But state in South Australia is very different from state in New South Wales.
Okay. Not as many people interested in rugby union.
No.
Tell me about life on the farm, or what it's like working there. What's your kind of day? Or
day starts with bookwork, and then do an hour or two of bookwork, then go to work, and then your day can be anything from 8 hours to 18 hours, depending on what happens or what goes wrong. But it depends if we're shearing or crutching or marking cows or marking lambs, just depending on what we're up to. In the busy times, it's always going to be a big day. In the sort of off, not as busy, we'll be sort of doing maintenance jobs and repairing stuff, or grading fences, fixing fences. And then home and try and spend a little bit of time with the kids before they go to sleep.
I always think of farming as almost just this job that never ends, really.
Oh, it is. If you didn't want to go home, you didn't have to.
Yeah.
You could just keep working. There is an old bloke once said to me, he said, if you ever think you've caught up, have another look, because you've missed it.
Mm. And that can, the never-ending tasks of looking after a place. How do you kind of manage resting and things like that amongst all the jobs?
You don't really.
Yeah.
You've eventually just got to bite the bullet and say, right, I'm going to go away for a couple of days, I'm going to do something, but you've just got to make sure that the chaos is going to be okay until you get back. It just never stops. If you didn't want to go away and have a holiday or have a break, you wouldn't have to. You've got to, budget your time, budget like it's not just from a financial point of view. You really need to work your time out to make sure that you're doing it at the time you've got the most available time, and the time where you wouldn't go on holidays in the middle of summer because it's as hard as it can be. So you try and pick winter with sort of in between busy periods, and you got to have someone there to look after it while you're away.
I guess a unique job in that sense of living so seasonally.
Look, I don't think it's as unique as people would imagine, because whether you're in the building industry, you could work as hard as you want, or tourism industry, there's always a peak and a low period. Building industry, or air conditioner mechanics, winter and summer. Well, winter it goes quiet, and summer all of a sudden they run off their feet. So everyone's got their own different seasonal sort of things, and anyone who works for themselves is work as hard or as little as they want.
What do you like about the work?
It's always different. You're never doing the same thing.
And do you like working with the animals?
Some days. Some days. No, look, the animals always give you a challenge, that's for sure. And trying to gently get them to do what you want them to do by letting them think that they're doing what they want to do is probably the only way of doing it, because it's the only way you'll get an animal to... You'll never get an animal to do what you want it to do, because it doesn't want to do that. So you just got to convince it, by making noise or sitting in a particular area that and they'll sort of wander off that way, because an animal will only do what it wants to do.
Yeah, I know. Previously, you just mentioned to me how with animals you need to kind of almost babysit them a lot more during hot weather, for example. I didn't know about that kind of aspect.
It's more the water.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong and the water runs out of water, that runs out very quickly, because their water consumption will go up by double, or even more than double during the summer.
Yeah. And what do you think you're good at on the farm? I know that's such a kind of... What do you think's your skill set like?
I don't think you don't really have one particular area that you're good at. You've got to be okay at everything. And
how do your dad and you... Is it just your dad and yourself who kind of work there, or...?
Yeah, occasionally the pilot who works for us, occasionally he'll help us, but at the moment it's just dad and myself.
And what are you doing at the moment?
At the moment we're just putting rams out with ewes, and then we'll sort of go into a fair bit of maintenance over the next sort of 2 months, maybe a bit of fencing.
And how much do you plan things, like or just responding to like, this needs fixing? Or
you make plans. You have to have a yearly plan of what you're going to try and get done, and you have a plan for the day of what you're going to try and get done, but that some days it works and some days things will pop up and you've got to change it, because if a water breaks down or something breaks down, if you were going to go and do something else, well, the priority's now changed. So you've always got a plan, but you've got to prioritise. Then your priorities just change whatever it requires.
Yeah, being flexible. Yeah. Now I understand you got 2 siblings.
Yeah, a brother and a sister. Yeah.
But it's just you who's kind of stuck with the farm.
Yeah.
What do you think more broadly about, I guess, the future of farming in a place like Broken Hill?
Future of farming has got a hell of a lot going for it, but it's going to become much, much more automated. There's less and less staff, so we've got to be able to manage everything, with minimal staff, by using all sorts of technology, whether that's using aeroplanes and helicopters through to remote watering sensors and cameras, so that we can check on things without having to actually go out there. Machines that'll pick sheep up, machines that'll pick heavy stuff up. Everything's got to be automated so that basically one person can do it, one, without hurting themselves, and two, that they physically don't need another person to help them. That's where it's sort of going, is just optimising your labour efficiencies.
Are there machines that robots you're kind of using now?
Oh, not robots, but there's certainly, there's all different devices we can use to either increase production or productivity, not so much production, or help, back aids and hoists and machinery that can pick stuff up.
Mm. And what about in a climate like Broken Hill? I mean, there's a lot of talk about climate change and things like that. Is that something that you're concerned about, or?
Climate change has been happening for millions of years. We have been dealing with climate change for as long as there's been farmers. They've been dealing with climate change. You've just got to adapt to it. If you run away scared from it, you'll never. It's like anything. You could be scared to walk across the road in case you get hit by a bus. So you just got to make plans, change things, make sure that you're as resilient as possible.
Mm. And what does that mean, do you think, for the next little while or the future?
You'd never stop. So you just got to adapt to the whole thing. You'll realise that, the thunderstorms have been more severe lately, so you build things to withstand, the new norm. And then by the time we finish doing all of that, something else will change. We'll have more wind, or we'll have more drought. So you try, you have more water storage, so you've got more water for the animals in a drought.
You've mentioned like thunderstorms just then. Is that what would be your examples of things that you've noticed that have changed?
In wildlife, weather patterns are much more severe. We have higher thunderstorm activity and higher rainfall for shorter periods of time, so we get a lot more runoff and a lot more damage happens to the country, which means we've got to do more work to try and repair that after the storms have come through. So trying to prevent erosion and all that sort of stuff.
And how do you do that?
You can prevent erosion by either planting more trees or seeding, or trying to slow the water down with loaders and graders, trying to stop the water from, not stop the water, but slow the water. The water's got to go somewhere, but it needs to go slowly. And so you try and repair either natural sort of breaks, or produce a break that'll slow the water down.
And what are you trying to do with that water? Would you like to kind of capture it in the landscape, or?
If you can slow it down enough, it'll infiltrate into the soil a lot better. So you increase, you'll increase the feed available for the stock, but it'll increase the perennials and then eventually trees, and it'll all start to restore itself purely by slowing the water down. You can start to restore it to what it would have been pre-mining days, because our place, every tree was cut off Thackaringa for the mines. So now we're sort of trying to rebuild the erosion that's caused us. And it's working. There's slowly but surely. We'll never see it in my lifetime, but we'll get it. Eventually it'll be hopefully run back to where it used to be.
Was that mulga trees that they cut down?
If it was standing upright, it went. So mulga, nearly a purple wattle, ballars, everything went.
Mm. And so is that what you're trying to grow again?
You won't really. They have to grow back naturally, because we've got some areas of that sort of tree, but they will take. There was some shot when I was a baby. They're now about a foot high.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Very
slow growing.
Yeah. So if 200-year-old tree would be about the height of this ceiling.
Yeah. Wow. So you're not trying to intentionally plant seeds, you're just kind of letting it happen.
You have to let it happen. You can't. You can aid some of the perennial grasses and perennial bushes and that sort of stuff, but the actual trees, you might be able to, if you had an endless budget, you might be able to do something, but you'd also need the rainfall event to aid you to be able to fix it.
You mentioned mining and how the place was cleared to help with the mines, but what about the history of exploration on Thackaringa? Has there been any mining exploration there?
There's been huge exploration on Thackaringa. It's like a bloody violet crumble out there. Everywhere you look, there's some form of remnants of exploration.
Back from the early days?
Well, look, predominantly from the 40s onwards, when they had still drill rigs and that sort of stuff, that they could go out and do exploratory holes without just having to dig a mine and hope for the best. So they got all the easy stuff that was onto the surface, and now they had to go and find where the rest of it was. And so through the early 40s, 50s, then the 60s and 70s, it just went berserk. There tens of thousands of drill holes.
Wow.
Yeah.
What were they looking for?
Silver, lead and zinc at that point in time. They were just assuming that Broken Hill's there's got to be more somewhere else.
How does the process work for someone who says, I want to come and explore on your property? How does it work?
We're supposed to, it's supposed to go down a pathway of an agreement, and then they come on. The government say that we're not allowed to prevent anyone from exploring on our property. The government is incredibly driven by mining. So the government's pro-mining, so pretty much we can't ever say no, and we can't. It's very difficult for us to work our lives around it. But look, some mining companies are great. They sort of do their best to help out and not come when the ewes are lambing and not come when the cows are calving. And then you get others who are just rogues and we're within our rights, we'll do whatever we want.
Is it, in terms of rights, and I don't know if this is more technical than what we can talk about, but is it like the mining, you own the top part of the ground and they own the...
Technically we own the top 6. We have the right to graze the top 6 inches, and then underneath is Crown land essentially. However, my argument is, well, my top 6 inches is the most important part, because you've got to get through my top 6 inches to access underneath.
So with so much activity that has gone on there, has there been any actual successful attempts?
No. There used to be the Triple Chance mine, and that was beryllium, mica and feldspar. But they shut down years ago. They ended up just being a processing plant basically. And then he hasn't worked for probably 15 years. But that was probably, hasn't mined anything in my lifetime, but it was a processing plant up until about 15 years ago.
So how does that work if they didn't mine anything?
Carting ore in, crushing it and sorting it, and then carting it back out.
But on Thackaringa?
Yeah.
Why?
Apparently it was too expensive to shift the processing plant or something. I'm really not sure. I really couldn't answer that question.
How do you see the relationship between mining and farming?
It's getting worse. Mining companies are becoming more and more heavy-handed and with less respect, particularly for the environment, and less respect for the farmers, and they have very little. And this is broad. There are some companies that don't, but they have very little care for what costs it incurs on farming communities.
Can you talk more about the environment impact?
Roads, drill pads. Every time they put a road in, it's going to create erosion. So we always try to maintain that our roads are as minimal roads as we absolutely need. When mining companies come in and they'll put 10,000 roads going in every different direction, and at the end of each road there's a drill pad, and they'll have a bulldozer making a drill pad so they can get their rigs on top of it, and you get everything from they're pushing trees out so the birds don't have somewhere to live. The lizards and that all get shifted as the bulldozer goes through. The dust, because as they're driving in and out, the dust coats the other vegetation in dust, which then starts to prohibit photosynthesis, because it's just like putting a blanket over it, and they start to die. There's massive impact, and I think I've already mentioned erosion, but erosion's huge. The moment it rains, just strips it out, and you've got just a new gully that's gone through the landscape.
Mm. Are there any current kind of mining activities going on Thackaringa?
At the moment, there's nothing happening. We've had a few last year and that, but at the moment, everything seems to have gone quiet.
And I understand you're a pilot, and how did you become interested in flying?
I think I always sort of was interested in it, and then there was a period when I was come home from boarding school. I was working for other companies, and they were using aeroplanes to muster, and so I thought, well, this is the only way to go. So I started flying that way, and then sort of just went a bit berserk after that. But yeah, sort of just started a bug. Once you got the bug, you're in trouble.
What do you start on? What do you learn on?
So I learnt in for like sort of lighter aircraft, little 2 seats aircraft, and then eventually went up to sort of your Cessna 172s, and did a fair bit of time in them, and I eventually got my commercial licence, and then we started our company, and then we progressed into helicopters as well.
Yeah, so you've started H&A with your wife, Aliza, and so I think that's quite recent, isn't it? Just only a couple of years.
I think the company started about 2018. Yeah.
And what services do you provide?
We do a mail run from Broken Hill up towards White Cliffs, and then just shy of the Queensland border. So we can take all of mail, any freight, depending on size. We can take as much freight as we can. We deliver, fresh groceries and that to people up there. We do that once a week, and then outside of that, we'll do any scenic flights. Broken Hill scenics out to Nindi, Silverton, and we also go all the way to Lake Eyre. And then also a bit of charter. If you need to go somewhere, it's not sort of Rex doesn't go there, we can sort of get you in and out of there, and plus we do mustering, and I do a little bit of training as well.
Have you had any scares in the plane?
I don't think there's anyone who hasn't scared himself in a plane. It's a little bit like a car. You scare yourself in a car, but you didn't crash, but you sort of that was. So I've been lucky. I haven't had any sort of major incidents. Yeah.
Just reflecting over the last couple of years, I think there has been like a couple of crashes, and people have died. So I imagine that kind of affects the flying community a little bit.
Yeah, it does. Look, every time it happens, it's incredibly sad. It's sad to lose the person, but then you think about their family as well. But that's unfortunately. I think people lose sight of it a little bit. People get hurt in car accidents. It just seems to make the news a bit more when it's an aeroplane. It doesn't make it any less sad or any less tragic. It just sort of seems to make the news a bit more, and particularly in the last month, there seems to have been quite a lot.
What do you like flying the most?
Depends what I'm doing. If I'm going from A to B, or need to get somewhere quickly, aero fixed wings are much more comfortable. If I'm working with stock or anything like that, I'd much prefer to be in a helicopter. They're a lot easier, and I think they're a lot safer too.
I imagine you've put in a lot of hours to be able to fly both a helicopter and a plane.
A lot of hours and a lot of money.
Yeah. But this is obviously something that you think is important, I guess.
Yeah.
As well as farming, I guess, having that skill set.
Oh, yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's good for my mental health because I can do. You're not always doing the same thing. You can sort of break out and do something a bit different. But also, we've sort of got obligation's not the right thing, but we offer a service to the rural community, like to get their mail and get their things delivered. And without that, they'd have to drive 4 or 5 hours to Broken Hill to get it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the roads are too wet or something, they can't get in. So, in that respect, to be able to do that doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy, but, it's sort of nice thing to be able to help out a bit.
Mm. You mentioned mental health. What are the things that you think it's important for people to know and understand about, the mental health of farmers?
It's a difficult one because you've got two generations. You've got the older generation who there's no such thing as mental illness, you just have to keep going. You've got the younger generation who are sort of starting to realise that it does happen. And there's a pretty taxing, particularly in droughts, when you're trying to keep animals alive, you're trying to do the best thing you can by the animal. You're having to sell them, or if for whatever reason you couldn't sell them because it got too dry, you're then trying to feed them and look after them so they don't die. You're doing the best you possibly can, and sometimes your best isn't good enough. It's just a way of looking, for the farming side of stuff, it's a way of looking at it. And is it outside of your control? Yes or no? Have you done everything you possibly can? Yep. Well, you just got to be happy that you've done everything you can and made sure the animals haven't suffered.
You've mentioned the difference in generations. Is it the younger generations more open and willing to chat if they're not feeling okay?
As a general rule, yes. But I think they're just more realising that the older generation I don't even think they really realised what depression was. Whereas the younger generation was like, yeah, I don't feel great. I haven't felt great for a week, well, that's a bad week. I haven't felt great for a month or 2 months, well, that's, there's something going on. And I think it's probably a bit more of an education thing, really. It's not just life's hard.
Yeah. I've heard Brendan Cullen has been a bit of an ambassador, I guess, for mental health.
Yeah.
And raising awareness about it. People here in the far west are talking about it.
Brendan's done a brilliant job. He really has. I mean, I don't think there's many people that don't know him and the reason they know him is because of what he's done, what he's achieved. Brendan and I have had a few chats about it because, he and I have both been in some pretty dark places and both come out the other side. But I think it's really important for people to see, particularly someone like Brendan who people do know, and he went and did the English Channel swim, not because he wanted everyone to know him, but because he was able to raise a hell of a lot of money, and more money than he ever thought he was going to raise. But in the I mean, in the process of that also, people now know who he is and know that he's had, something, and he's able to help people out, or they can see, well, he did it, why can't I? Yeah.
You just mentioned you had a few dark places yourself. What helped you, or what got you out of those dark holes?
To be honest, Aliza. Without Aliza, I'd probably still be a mess. I tried everything from psychologists and medication and all that sort of stuff, and I was on medication for a long, long time. It was just not working, but psychology helped, and then Aliza sort of teaching me how it all actually works, and bit of support there was definitely.
Aliza, who is your wife, who's also training to be a doctor?
Or she is a doctor.
Doctor.
Yeah.
So that's good support.
Yeah. You hear of things like meditation, and 10 years ago, if you'd asked me what meditation was, I said that's just what stoners do around a campfire. But then you realise it's more than. There's a lot to it, and you can do a hell of a lot, and the mind's an incredibly powerful thing. It's a matter of harnessing what the mind can do.
Yeah, how's your mental health at the moment, if you don't mind me asking?
It's great, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, busy as we've ever been in my entire life, but my mental health is awesome. But I also, I know how to deal with it these days. I've got the ability to know, yep, all right, I'm going downhill. What do I need to do? What do I need to change to make that better? And it's not anything anyone else can do. It's all you got to do it yourself.
Yeah, well, just appreciate your honesty. I think it's still hard to talk about in some ways, or maybe you don't find it hard, but I think it's really good that you're being open and honest about it, and removing any kind of stigma associated with it.
It's just like, cancer or breaking your leg, or it's the same thing. It's just you can't see it physically. And I think trying to hide it doesn't help anyone else, but it doesn't affect anyone else. Trying to hide it only affects yourself. And that's probably what I think. It's never bothered me ever since. Like, I've had it for 15 years now, or been dealing with mental health for 15 years, and it just I've always been open with it, and it's never bothered me. It's just, well, I'm crook. You can't see it.
Yeah. And I guess going back to the drought, I mean, was that kind of one of the things? Do you think the drought kind of played into it for you, or?
Look, certainly, probably the workload during some of the droughts. The latest one we had, there were definitely some days where I was, it wasn't good. But by that point in time, I had Aliza, or Hazel was born by then as well, so he actually had something to come home to, sort of break away from the depression of it, and just do things like I never watch the weather. It's no point. You're not going to change it, so there's no point in stressing about it. And just sort of learnt these things, in previous years, that if you can't change it, don't stress it, because then it just builds this snowball in your own head that you can't control. And by controlling it early and preventing, the mind from winning, really.
Just to change track a little bit, going back to farming work, we've talked a bit about mining. What about the relationship of pastoral stations and Indigenous people? I mean, has there been much interaction with Indigenous people wanting to survey the property for cultural heritage items and the like?
We've never experienced it in my life. We haven't ever seen it. I don't know whether that's because there's other places like Mootwingie and Menindee and those sorts of places which are of more cultural significance. I really don't know.
Yeah, but no one's been interested, so that's...
No.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a touchy subject, but how do you see, like, succession, I guess, just generally, between passing on farms to the next generation? I mean, is that a difficult thing?
It's incredibly difficult. When if you to look at it from the younger generation's point of view, because every farmer goes through it. The younger generation's point of view, they want to be able to use their ideas and try and make something of it and make it a little bit their own. But then on the flip side, the other generation, like the generation going out, have this almost feel of not being needed and then all their entire life's work has come to an end almost. But well, not come to an end, but what they've done and everything they've done is sort of stops there, and someone else takes over and moves on. And I think there's a huge emotional stress, and I reckon one of the biggest issues with succession is emotional stress. Now, that's not every family. I mean, I'm sure everyone has their own other issues, and finance definitely comes into it. Finance, more siblings, all that sort of multiple siblings makes it even more difficult. But I think the biggest toll's probably emotional.
I mean, it's sensitive topics. I mean, how do you broach these conversations? I mean, do you see yourself there at Thackaringa, in the future, or?
Yeah, look, what Aliza and I do, and Dad's happy that we're going to take over, and we've sort of started to get to the point where we know where we're going. But I think we're sort of like the beer and Skittles sort of success story. It's been a long time coming, but there's a lot of other people who don't have that the success at succession planning.
Yeah, what's this year looking like for you with the farm?
Looks awesome.
Yeah.
It was looking pretty ordinary until 2 weeks ago. Now it looks green as anything. So for the next 3 or 4 months anyway, we're going pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what happens with you mentioned before you've got the ewes out?
Rams are out.
The rams are out with the ewes. Yeah. So what then happens? Like, how long do you leave them out for, and what's that?
We won't go into detail about what happens, but they stay in there for about 3 to 4 months, and then when we go to shearing, they'll get drafted off again. Rams will go and live by themselves for the rest of the year, and by that point, hopefully at least 90% of the ewes are pregnant.
And start again.
Yeah, basically.
What's your favourite part of the sheep season?
Yeah, I really don't know, because you're just always doing something different. I don't really have a favourite time of year, to be honest.
Yeah?
Probably definitely not the winter. I hate the winter. I just hate the cold.
Spoken like a Broken Hill person.
Yeah, I can't deal with the cold.
Do you shear yourself?
Only if it's life depends upon it.
Okay.
I could crutch somewhat, but and I only do that if I have to, and literally someone's got to die before I'll shear.
You mentioned staffing can be a bit of a problem. So what's happening with the shearing gangs? Is it just less people are out shearing?
Less. It just the shearing contractors are tearing their hair out because they just can't get any staff, and it will come to the point where the wool industry collapses.
Really?
Yeah, it's the writing is on the wall. Particularly in like the more remote you are, the more, like over in the east coast where they've got more people, it probably won't, but I'll be pretty certain in the next 10 to 15 years the wool industry will have collapsed out here.
So, how do you prepare for that, or what do you do to change and adapt?
You've just got to change breeds. You've got to go to a meat sheep or a cow or a goat and do something different.
And you don't need to shear them then?
No.
Are you just have meat, or you've got wool?
So we've got both. We've got wool and meat. But yeah, you'd have to consider going somewhere different with it, for sure.
Why is it, do you think, so hard for them to find workers?
It's an incredibly tough job. I don't care what anyone says. If you're a shearer, it's hard work, and they earn their keep. And I don't think people want to spend their life living 80% of the year away from home, working as hard as they work. There's better jobs that can earn, nearly as much money, and you can stay home.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, what's going to place a greater price on wool then, if there's going to be less shearers around in the future?
We'll put it this way: Australian wool production basically accounts for about 2% of all of the textile industry in Australia. Not just wool is about 2% of all the textile industries. So there's not going to be a massive change when we're talking such minute amounts, even at the moment. The price of wool garments and that's going to go up because there's not as much there, but realistically, the general population, I don't even buy wool. It's already too expensive. It's only the high end people who actually use wool, unless it's in insulation.
Yeah.
So really, I don't think we as a consumer will ever really even notice that it goes. But it's not going to go. New Zealand's still got a huge wool industry. Argentina, South Africa, and Australia's wool industry won't die completely, but it will, I think, in remote parts of Australia.
So New Zealand, they can still get shearers and things?
I don't know. They've got their wool industry's going gangbusters. I don't know whether it's staffing or what it is, but also you don't have to travel far.
Yeah, pretty nice place to travel to as well, travel between. Is the wool price good at the moment, or?
No, it's terrible.
Is it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think it's partly to do with the war in Ukraine, and I think probably a bit of China doesn't want to buy, and it's just markets.
Because I thought a couple of years ago it was kind of skyrocketing in price.
Yeah, about 3 years ago it skyrocketed, 3 or 4 years ago. Wool price skyrocketed, meat prices skyrocketed, and then about 12 to 18 months ago, they just crashed.
Yeah, we haven't chatted about meat. You've got cattle, don't you?
Yeah.
What do you grow?
So we got shorthorns. So that's just a beef for beef. Yeah. But we haven't got a lot at the moment. We're slightly rebuilding them.
And why that breed?
Oh, they're not too bad suited. They've done well here in the drought. Look, you could potentially put a bit of Bos Indicus into them to make them a little bit bigger and walk a bit better long distances, but they survive quite well here. That's what Dad's always run, and not saying he wouldn't change if something better was there, but they seem to do a pretty good job.
What do other farmers do locally?
In Angus, Shorthorn, Brahman. Actually, don't see too many Brahmans, but Herefords. Everyone hears about Angus because the Angus, the governing body of Angus Australia, Angus Cattle Beef Australia, they have done an incredible job at marketing, and I take my hat off to them because everyone wants an Angus beef burger or an Angus piece of steak, and that's all been marketing, and they've done an incredible job.
So you don't think it's worth switching?
Well, no, you'll get a premium for Angus for sure. But where Angus are also a much bigger animal, they require more feed. So whether or not, I don't think you'd actually be able to, if you grew Angus here, you grow very scrawny little Angus, it wouldn't work, wouldn't be saleable, because they're a bit bigger animal, they require a bit more feed. So for us, you go with something that's not going to quite give you the premium, but they're a bit of a hardier animal, don't require so much feed.
Where do they get sent?
Wherever. We generally sell them to other farmers, so
Okay.
yeah, they'll leave us and then go to another farmer.
So you don't usually send them to the abattoir?
No.
How do you trade? Is there sale yards here?
No, generally just we use agents. An agent will come in and have a look, and they'll either bring a buyer with them, and then they'll be happy with yes or no. And yeah.
Are they easy animals to work with?
If you're good to them, they'll be good to you. If you're nice and quiet with them, and depending on where if they've been brought up well and you treat the animal well, they sort of won't give you too much grief. But yeah, there's certainly some wild cattle around. Luckily, I don't have to deal with any of them.
You're not. What do you mean by wild cattle around? Like rogue?
So in Longreach, I think that 7 people per week are in hospital due to cattle injuries.
Yeah, right.
So, there's particularly in the higher sort of more bigger cattle country, they have a lot of injuries just because some are not intentional. They're just a big animal. Some will try and kill you. They'll jump fences to try and kill you.
Yeah. Nothing happened like that to you?
No, never. No.
Yeah. Goats? Do you have many goats, rogue goats on the property?
Yeah, we do. It just depends on the day. They'll be there some days and they'll be all gone the next day. They sort of just the wind will change and they'll come back on to our place and we'll try and muster them and sell them. But yeah, one day you'll have a heap and the next day there'll be none. Just depends.
I've heard they're pretty hard to catch. Is that true?
Yeah, they're not as easy as a sheep, that's for sure. But you can trap them and muster them, and there's lots of different ways.
What's your trick?
Bit of both. You try everything.
Yeah. That was Hugh Lord, the 5th generation farmer from Thackaringa Station outside Broken Hill.